And we are back in the TechLounge studio live from the Hall 2 at CeBIT 2015. You can watch us over here. Actually, you can come over here to the Intel booth in Hall 2 and see us sitting in our little studio, which is, thank God, it is equipped with an air condition, which is, I think, not running right now, to be honest. Anyways, you know what? The next panel that we have over here is quite interesting because it somehow also tells a little bit the story of CeBIT in the last 4 years, which was all about digital transformation, even though that we're talking about the digital economy, no, which is actually the topic of this year. But what happened to the CeBIT in the last 4 years was a real transformation from a very, very classic enterprise B2B into a show that is also embracing startups and a lot of new technologies that got up and grew in the last years. So our panel that we have right now, and I would love to have our panelists introducing themselves, will be all about the transformation, the development of infrastructures in enterprise and businesses. So over here to my left we have.
Hello, my name is Ulf Simon-Weidner. I'm working for Computer Center here in Germany, and I'm in the Strategy and Solution department.
Great, thank you. And on my right.
Hi, I'm Priestley, and I look after Intel's cloud marketing strategy in Europe.
So fantastic. So what you guys saw over here in the last, I think this year, this is actually, it was 30 years ago since I got over here on my very first CeBIT. Well, it was my class at that time. And especially what happened in the last 4 or 5 years. Like, Alan, we've been talking about infrastructures last year during our live stream, but especially what happened as soon as someone started the cloud computing and big data buzz around, that is just amazing. All of a sudden, everything seemed to change, and we were urging companies and business and infrastructure to change their infrastructure and ecosystems.
Well, we are, but then think about it. Everything thinks IT is a static business, right, and it's stable. But if you look back over the years, and sadly I've been doing this for far too many years, right, there's this constant change. Think about IT. We went through client-server. We went through the dot-com boom. We went through server consolidation, then virtualization, now cloud. And think about where we're going to go next. It's all around software-defined infrastructure. So we've got this continual evolving change happening. So although people say it's only just starting to happen, I think you look back, there has been a constant shift. And IT by no means a stable or staid occupation to be in. It's one of the more exciting spaces.
But isn't this actually somehow the most disruptive one, especially for infrastructures in enterprise and businesses? Because, what you mentioned, the classic client-server architecture, and out of a sudden, it's all about outsourcing into the cloud.
Oh, it's about we just don't have single topics. So outsourcing into the cloud is a very interesting part. And actually, this year, from the server infrastructure area, we are actually losing support of Windows Server 2003, which is must do for all the companies out there because Windows Server 2003 had a very broad installation rate. Yeah. On the other hand, it's a big opportunity too to look at the systems what you're running currently, to consolidate those things, to explore new technologies like new servers, new processors, new operating systems give you a lot of possibilities what you can use today. And cloud services are one of the strategies which must be considered there.
Mm-hmm. So, aren't we basically coming back to the roots with this? Because I remember when the MIT and IBM, and I don't remember it, but I know it, and did it back in the 60s, right? And at the time where we're talking about just having like 2 or 3 mainframes in the world, and this was all about time-sharing processing power. Yeah.
There was a time when nuclear was so expensive that you had to run it on an operating basis. You had to pay for usage of it. And we went away from that. And now with cloud coming back and more cloud usage, we're seeing IT's transition from a CapEx to an OpEx-centric mode of operation. So people are caring more about what it costs them to deploy a service and therefore how they pay for that. So I think it's one of the transitions. It's big cycles. And we go through cycles over time.
Yeah. And isn't it also actually infrastructures became less expensive due to this, right?
Yes,
So,
yeah.
It's about saving hardware platforms, outsourcing more into the clouds. We have more competition in the cloud right now, which is good for the pricing.
Yeah, that's incredible business. We've developed and driven high-performance compute at cost-effective price points, enabling a broad audience to get more capacity.
Yeah.
So that's going forward.
Actually, it's not just about the price. It's also pretty interesting because with all the new technologies and with all the new possibilities what we are getting, we are basically able to enable our users. And that's actually what we are doing. Like the department I'm working in, we are always looking in how can we enable the users of our customers more and more. And to enable the users, they also need not just the new front ends which are changing with tablets, everything, but also the server infrastructure which is providing them possibilities such as going mobile, having instant messaging, all those things what you want to have in a modern workspace today.
Tim?
Of course, we here from the IT industry are very excited about the stuff we see at CeBIT. And for us, it's sort of, almost business as usual. But if you go out and ask companies, in Germany especially, what they're doing, you will see a very different picture. The Bitkom, the German Association of IT, just released a study that maintained that only about 40% of German small and medium-sized businesses actually run cloud computing and trust cloud computing. They still are very, very cautious. The only people that really use cloud almost efficiently are big companies. There, about 70% are actually doing cloud. How do we reach the small and medium-sized companies, which, after all, are the backbone of the German economy?
So I think this is one of the challenges you've got here in Germany. If we look across the whole of Europe and did the same survey, I think you get dramatically different results. And as we were talking earlier, I think a lot of the German companies, they may not think they're using cloud, but probably are in some fashion. They're probably using email services outside. And also, if you look at the German marketplace, there's a very, very strong dedicated physical hosting market. We've got a lot of companies, 1&1, Strato, Host Europe, Intergenia, people like that, they're making business providing compute resources connected across the internet. Now, okay, it's not cloud in the classic sense, right? But a lot of small businesses use that sort of service today rather than have a server sat under their desk. I think it's got to be a small step for them to go from there into a more classic compute environment. And we're going to see a change happen. If we don't, they're going to lose out in their competitiveness versus other companies coming from outside of Germany or even startups growing up in Germany that don't have that infrastructure.
Ulf, the study also indicated that German companies, if they do actually opt for the cloud, prefer to do private cloud. That is, they run their own cloud. And the study also showed that the promise of reduced cost through cloud computing just does not materialize if you do it in a private cloud environment. You still have the IT costs, so essentially you're not getting the cost efficiency that cloud providers and cloud vendors have been promising for years.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not too sure about all the studies because what we see in studies many times is the sale rate, but not the adoption rate. So especially what we have in Germany is that many companies are getting, for example, Office 365, and then they are simply using it to get the Office licenses covered, but they don't use the online features, which are giving you a lot of benefits. So I think in the German market, we need to be aware that we are competing with international markets, and if we don't look into those cloud technologies more deeply and using them, then we are actually losing against our competition in the future. And getting back to your point, yes, you can. I think even with private clouds, you are able to save money, run more efficiently, but you have to do it very tough. If you have the same amount of IT people managing the same amount of systems, the same amount of servers, if they're virtualized or not, if you use the same processes, then you have the same expenses. But if you're able to put more intelligence, more automation in there, and really transforming a virtualized environment into a really, really private cloud, which is clever managed, then you get benefits out of it, which are mirroring on your cost side too.
If not, you're just taking money from one pocket and putting it in the other.
Sure.
So, yeah, but I think the challenge with cloud is people think of cloud as a thing. It's something out there, right? Cloud computing is not. It's a mode of operation. What you've got to think about is you're changing from a CapEx-driven IT organization to an OpEx-driven IT organization. And you've got to think about processes and what's changing. So even if you do private cloud, right, you're looking at how you optimize your IT infrastructure. And it may not just be about saving physical costs. It's about actually making yourself more efficient using cloud architectures, cloud modes of operation. It's not just about something that's set out on the internet.
This is quite interesting questions from our viewers here in the chat room. If this is a kind of very specific challenge for you guys here on the German market, is the German customer a little bit, when it comes to privacy and to share data into a cloud environment, a little bit more picky? Is this somehow different? Is this a typical German angst?
Yeah, we are Germans. We are a little bit more conservative, and we look at things very thoroughly. We are great engineers, and great engineers look very deep into things. So yeah, we have a slower adoption rate of those things. On the other hand, we also can look into the possibilities what cloud is giving us, because we have a lot of opportunities there, and not every data, not every server is a bad thing to put into the cloud. We have workloads which are not as business critical, so we can actually start with those and get experiments about the cloud. And then we can actually, there are more and more possibilities coming out there, like Microsoft Azure is providing now encryption services, what you can host on-premise to make your cloud data secure. So we should look into those opportunities.
Of course, just because I'm paranoid does not mean that they aren't out to get me. So maybe some of this angst is actually understandable.
Yeah, actually a good friend of mine who was a long-term speaker in security affairs said once that you have to maintain a healthy level of paranoia, and I think that's the point. We need to have a healthy level of paranoia and not be completely paranoid.
Yeah, I think it also comes back to the traditional German marketplace. Germany has a very strong Mittelstand. Small businesses, very engineering, very product-centric. And I think if you look at those guys, those are the guys that are probably more reluctant to move to the cloud. If you look at the newer services type economy, the new startups coming up, you know, they're using the cloud. There are people out there, you go to a lot of these conferences where it's lots of startup companies there. There's a lot of people there that are using the technology. And they're getting over the reticence because of data, or the data types and what they store.
Of course, these German Mittelstand that you're describing are also very conservative.
Yes.
They hesitate to change a running system, but of course, it looks like they're going to be forced, because this year, Windows Server 2003 will reach its end of life, end of service. That sort of puts the pistol to the head of IT departments all over it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think many people have got to look at what they're doing. A lot of people have been running it, as you say, for an extended period of time. The challenge they face is, you know, they're not only running Windows 2003 Server as an old legacy operating system, they're typically also running it on legacy hardware. Right? So you've got the two combined together. If you look at the way the hardware has evolved over the past years, the performance you get, the power efficiencies you get coming off the hardware, it actually makes a lot of sense now, even if you want to just keep your server under your desk, right? To upgrade both the operating system and the hardware. You can save costs, you become more power efficient, you can get more performance, you can do more with the same amount of hardware. And you've then got the opportunity, using the latest generation software, you know, latest Windows 2007, latest Windows Server 2012, right, which gives you the ability to move your data or your workload out to the cloud if you want to, or keep it on premise if you want to. So you have much more flexibility and choice. So it's something people have to do. You can't. You know, we shouldn't just think of things being static any longer. We have to move with the times on some of this stuff.
But of course, the German economy is riddled with Windows Server 2003 installments. It's everywhere. There are millions of them in Germany. Why is that so? Because, I mean, if you think about it for a while, 2003, that's ages ago in internet time. In fact, I did the computing, and I found out that would mean approximately driving on the Autobahn with a vintage car from about 1925, Hanumak Kommissbrot or something like that. Why do companies do that? They can't do the modern applications. They can't do social, mobile, big data on an antiquated server system, can they?
Yeah, the big thing about Windows Server 2003, and you're right, we have the broadest installation rate, and I actually think that this is a worldwide thing. What we've seen is that every customer was going from some NT world into the Windows 2000 Active Directory modern worlds, and Windows 2000 was adopted by a couple companies, and other companies were skipping Windows 2000 and they went from Windows NT directly to Windows Server 2003. But Windows Server 2000 was not as enterprise ready as Windows Server 2003 was. So all the companies who moved to 2000 also moved to 2003 later. But afterwards, the system was running very stable. It's a workhouse, it's working very well, the server system. So customers afterwards did only adjust the parts of the infrastructure where they needed it. So if they wanted to introduce a new directory service, they were upgrading the parts of the directory service. If they want to have a new email system, they were upgrading the emailing system to Exchange and the directory service. Mm-hmm. So they did application-based upgrades, but they didn't look at the infrastructure as a whole again. And that's something that's the main reason why we are having such a broad installation rate of Windows Server 2003. And I think that most of the customers are still running Windows Server 2003 somewhere, but you don't also see it all the time because we are running everything virtualized now, and we don't walk through the data centers and we see the screens anymore. So
I mean, that's quite interesting. What's going to happen if we're all going to make this shift and transition over into the cloud, right? So if we were leaving these traditional hardware setups in the businesses behind us. So basically, they actually don't need any more server admins at all. They don't need to care about upgrades anymore. I mean, the next future upgrade is going to happen in the cloud. So this is basically where you guys are kicking in.
It would be great if everybody went to the cloud, but the reality is, and we've already been through part of the discussion about private cloud, I think most people are going to deploy internally on a private cloud infrastructure. They're going to change the way they operate, and then they're going to use external cloud services on an as-needs basis. Maybe some new workloads will be landed out there, some won't. I think you're going to see a shift in IT, right? IT has to move from being physical deployments, plumb the stuff together, right? And they've got to think more about service levels, operational efficiency, and probably even certain contracts with these suppliers. Yeah. So it's a mental shift that they've got to, but it's about the process, right? And the people. The technology, as you say, some guys might absolve their technological needs by going to the cloud. But against that, I would still say, hey, you've got to know what's in the cloud. Because if you don't, you can't get the best from your workload. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of the stuff that Intel's doing, we're putting into the platform to accelerate workloads. We want the cloud providers to expose that to the customer. So if the customer's got a workload that needs AVX, the instruction set that accelerates HPC type loads, they know which providers provide it and that they can get access to that. So they can't say, hey, it's the cloud, forget about it, right? They have to know what technology is because they need to know what the workload requires. But at the same time, they've then got to think differently about, hey, what's the SLA I'm getting from there? What's my legal terms, T's and C's? It's not just about connecting cables together into boxes anymore.
Isn't there a danger that companies will simply fudge the issue? They will just continue running 2003 because it works. Isn't that a danger of German companies and even the German economy falling behind because we're still using this antiquated software?
Yeah, that's right. So that's what I said earlier, is that companies need to consider going into the cloud and getting experiments. And not every workload is right for the cloud. So to answer your question too, like we have workloads which are running in the cloud very well, but we have workloads like, for example, if you're in an industrial plant and you have like industry robots working together to build a car, you don't want to have the decision because a human is stepping there, and you don't want to have the security interruption, not to have the robot killing the human. You don't want to have this decision depending on your internet provider and running the decision back into the cloud. So not every workload, not every data is made for the cloud, but there are many possibilities today what we should look at when we want to implement cloud services. And the main thing, the main thing is the integration with the cloud, that you get your on-premise environment talking to the cloud and that you're able to move the data and your processes wherever they fit best.
Mm-hmm. Windows 2003 server replacement is probably one of the biggest IT migration processes in history, comparable possibly with Y2K. It looks as though investment is picking up. IDC predicts a boom in integrated infrastructure in EMEA in 2015. It said that vendor systems containing servers, disk storage, networking kits, etc., grew by 38% in the third quarter of last year. Is Intel excited about this opportunity? Is this the year that people will start replacing their aging infrastructure?
Well, I think the impending end of life there provides lots of customers opportunity to upgrade. If you look over the years, we've seen a continual growth in our data center business. And I think a lot of companies have already gone through this phase. I think there's a lot of companies that haven't gone through this phase. So there's a kind of progressive transition happening. I don't think everything, we know for certain at the moment that it's not the case that every 2003 server license that ever sold has not been upgraded. We know that a lot have been upgraded. We know that there are still a significant percentage out there that are awaiting upgrade, right? And we know that the customers that do that have got a number of opportunities as to what they can do. They land to new hardware, on-premises, they land to the cloud. So I think it does provide an opportunity for ourselves and our partners to grow business during this year. I think there's some exciting opportunities because if you think about the way technology has transitioned and what else is happening, it's not just about the CPU. It's about the increase in network performance, bandwidth we're getting there, the changes we're seeing in the storage capacity. So there's huge opportunities there for businesses to leverage the new technologies and layer across the top of that some of the other things you can do now that you couldn't do in the past. You walk around the show here and, hey, big data is a big thing that people are talking about, right? And everybody's talking about analytics and how you can utilize the data that you have access to. You can only do that, and some of that stuff is only enabled because of the compute that you've now got easily accessible. And you didn't have that on your old legacy hardware. You just couldn't do it realistically. So you've now just replaced the hardware, you look at your software stack, but then it says, okay, so what else can I do with what I've got, what information I know, and how can I help that improve my business? So I think for businesses looking here, they shouldn't think about it as a refresh cycle. It's actually, how do I innovate? What can I do? What can I do now that I couldn't do before, right? Especially given the social media stuff that's happening, the analytics, the cloud, it all comes together.
Of course, the pressure is on for IT departments to increase their performance. IDC also released a study recently in which they found that the business units are increasingly impatient because they perceive IT as a bottleneck. How do you think IT departments will react to this?
Sorry, again. They see the IT departments as a bottleneck, yeah. I actually can't say. I hope that they start thinking as we do, that the main goal is to enable users and think what their customer wants and not what's opportune for IT departments. You have to be the customer. And I think the working styles will change when the generations are coming in. Like my son is growing up and he's wiping on the TV and he doesn't understand why it's not switching the channel. And if those generations are coming into companies, IT departments have to change.
Yeah.
Well, Ulf, Alan, thank you so much for joining us over here. It's still going to be a huge challenge. It's always, when transformation is happening, when these new disruptive technologies are coming to the market, it's not only about the challenges, but it's also about the opportunities, and it's also about the opportunities for a whole new industry. So thank you so much for joining us. Wir machen jetzt einen kleinen Break. Der Rob zeigt euch den Intel-Stand und dann treffen wir uns in etwa 10 Minuten wieder live mit dem Peter Gleisner von Intel, Vice President, Manager Director, Sales Europe. Und dann schauen wir mal einfach an, was sie an neuen, natürlich auch vom Mobile World Congress gerade vor 2 Wochen, was da an neuen Technologien vorgestellt wurde. Bis gleich.